Okay, so let's look at the next rendering engine available to us. So I'm going to make a new composition and we'll keep it the same. This time we're going to call it the Cinema 4D engine. And we'll go over to the 3D renderer and we'll set that Cinema 4D. So this rendering engine comes from, I believe, an external piece of software called Cinema 4D. And we've had the ability to use a kind of a light version of Cinema 4D inside of After Effects in the past, and I believe we still can if we want. And what we can do with that is we can have lights and shadows, but we can extrude and bevel 2D shapes into 3D shapes, which is really good. We can bevel text as well. We can also curve flat elements, which is really good. There is also some environment capabilities and possibilities if you're getting a bit more complicated. I'm going to click OK and we'll have a play around, sort of replicate a similar scene as what we did before. Might take a moment for After Effects to build that composition. So each renderer that we're using now is more complicated than the previous one and uses more CPU and memory. Basically takes more time to do anything and is slower, but gives us, I suppose, more complicated results. So let's build something here. Again, we want some text. All right. I'm going to center that anchor point. And let's use a couple of shapes. So these are some vector tools. I'm going, oops, no, I don't want to make a mask. I'm going to click off the text, draw out a pink circle, and let's grab another shape, a star maybe. And, oops, let's make sure that we make a separate shape. I need to click off those already existing layers, and maybe we'll change that to yellow shape. Text in the background, and we'll also add a solid in the background. So two shapes, solid and some text. All right, so we are in the Cinema 4D rendering space. Let's add a camera as well. Pop that at the top. We'll add some lights too, but we might still a bit more setup before we get to the lights, because we have already done that. Okay, so we'll turn on our 3D layers. Fantastic. So we've got our 3D widgets. Let's have a look at positioning our elements. Do a similar kind of setup as we did before. I'll take, oops. Oops, got the wrong tool here. Bring the text forward, make sure we're using the move tool, and position these 3D, sorry, not 3D yet, these elements behind it, and take that background element back a bit further. Something like that. We'll go back to our camera one. So that's looking good. Let's position the camera, rotate some things around so we can see it in 3D. Use our pan tool to position that. So looking good. Now what can we do in here that's different? Let's have a look at our material options. Twirl down our material options, and we've got geometry options available to us. While we're here, I might turn on the cast shadows. But geometry options allows us to extrude objects in space. So I'm just going to open up that extrusion depth, and you can see that our object now has some volume, our text has some volume. We'll look at that from a side view, and you can see it's actually got some depth now. We'll expand it out just to make it really more prominent or more obvious. Go back to the camera and we can see that if I pan around, we can see that it is indeed a 3D object, which is great. At this point, I might actually add a light because it is kind of hard to see the bevel, the extrusion properly without some light fall off. So there we go, give it a name. My spot. And we'll just add a spotlight to start with. Use those previous settings. Click OK. And you can see that now with a spotlight, our edges are kind of a bit more visible. I'm going to increase the intensity so that we can see a little bit more there. And you can see those edges. Let's see if we can position the light so that we can shine it a bit more on those edges. Yeah. That's looking good. Open up that cone angle. At this point, it might be good to revise this draft 3D section. So with the draft 3D option selected there, we get faster previews. So if your computer's having trouble, use the draft 3D, and you just kind of can toggle that on and off to check, you know, how things are actually looking. But as you're working, it might be good to have the draft 3D turned on. I'm going to go back to our text layer. And back to our geometry options, because we've got this option to bevel our extruded object. So it could be angular, an angular bevel. And now we've got this like nice little highlight, which is good, and we can expand on that. The other options that we've got in there are concave. So we can create a kind of groove around that bevel, or we've got convex, which makes it a bit more kind of bubbly, which is good. And we'll take that out to its highest value, which is 10, which is not huge, so we can't make like really pillowy objects. To do that, we'd need to create a 3D model, which we'll look at later. So this text is 3D, but the great thing about text and 3D is that it is editable. So if I wanted to kern out that, I can just go in between, you know, select the text, go in between the glyphs, and I'm just opening up the space there using keyboard shortcut of Option and the keyboard arrows. Let's extrude these shapes, because we can extrude shapes as well. We'll just need to go down to the material options. We'll turn cast shadows on, and then also go to the geometry options, and in there we can set extrusion depth, and also add that softer edge to it. So you can extrude text and shapes, but you can't extrude just 2D raster material like photography, or solid layers like we've got here, which you know, is unfortunate, but it's all good. extrude that as well. Now let's put another light in the space, like we did before. A new light, just to lighten things up. We could put another spotlight and create like a 2-point or 3-point light. But I think like what we did before with the ambient light, just to open things up, is kind of good. But the intensity is way too strong. And I kind of like that because we get a bit of shadow fall off, and just checking those settings. With 2D layers though, we do have some material options. So we can, obviously we can cast shadow, but we can also, in our geometry options, we have the option to bend something. So I'm just going to change the background color to something a bit darker. Maybe we'll not make it even black. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. That's pretty strange. Not sure why that's happening. Can't kind of see this object here. Maybe I'll go to its solid settings and kind of lighten it up. See if I can. Oh, very odd. Look at it from a different view. There we go. I'm not sure what's happened to that layer. It's behaving a bit strangely, so I've just replaced it. Don't have the time to work out what's going on with that. We'll push it into the background. Make sure that it's accepting shadows. It is accepting shadows, that's good. And yeah, I was trying to get to this point where looking at its geometry options, we can actually curve it, and so we can bend it like this. So if you wanted to make kind of nice, like kind of sets or something like that, you can do so. And the amount of segments allows us to kind of curve it off nicely. You could have something quite chunky and geometric, or you can have something quite smooth. We might just finish off by animating our scene, animating the camera like we did before. So I'll set a point of interest and position keyframe. Over at 2 seconds here, we'll adjust that. Adjust our position. Pan ourselves in. Oops. Accidentally zoomed in there. And position our camera like so. And we'll create. Make sure we go to our camera. So here we go, we've got our sets of keyframes on our point of interest, the start and at the end. Now, as I'm rendering that, we can see that that's taking a bit more time than it was with the classic rendering engine. And that definitely will be the case with all of that kind of different light fall off and all of those different shadowing and shading. It's going to take a lot more time for our computer to do the rendering, but you can see that we can get some interesting visual effects, and there's a lot of promise there.